me not chase any rabbits today. And when I start going over 2 minutes on one area, just raise your hand and I'll move on. So we can do this together as a team. Anybody got any prayer requests? A couple of mm, yeah. What's her first name? Peggy White. All right. Going down. See Brother Tommy. All right, keep him and you're back in the hospital. Anybody else? Just to update, JD's at home. I talked to JD last night. He got home. His sister spent the night with him to make sure he didn't do anything he wasn't supposed to. And his neighbors are checking on him. So he's doing good. And he said he probably would not be here this morning resting, but he plans on being at men's church tonight. So keep JD in your prayers. All is well. He still has a little bit with his vision. Everybody know the actor Jack Ellum, he's got them crazy eyes. He says he's got the Jack Ellum problem right now. One straight, and the other one's cocked off to the right just a little bit. So I just told him not to look at me with that eye. So, but they expect everything to come back to normal and good on that. And he's building up the strength in his legs. So he's doing good. Bronson's mom is, they moved her to another hospital. She still needs your prayers. And if you don't know, Jonah's in the hospital. He had work on his heart, and he was doing good, but a few setbacks. And I talked to Colleen yesterday via text, and they had him sedated and on a ventilator. And so he's still in ICU, so keep Jonas and Colleen in your prayers. They need it. And another friend of mine, his mom had a little bit of a stroke, so it seemed like it was a week of moms, so be careful of your mom. And there was a lot of things going on this week. Anything else? Yeah, he was sharing with us this morning. A lot of pain, and they don't want to have any pain pills or nothing to affect the test at all. So she's going through a lot of tests, and she's in a lot of pain. So keep Terry in your prayers. All right. Other than the cold weather, we're supposed to have like 4 days of spring. We'll probably have 1 day of summer, then we're going to be back into winter. So just keep all your clothes in the same closet. Don't get excited. Anything else? Who wants to open us in prayer? Amen. Thank you, brother. All right, we're still in Genesis, and we're going to be reading out of Genesis 27. 41 is going to be the area that we're going to start. But first off, I'm going to check and see how everybody is. We're in church, remember. Has anyone ever got mad? Everybody, hopefully? All right, we ain't no saints so far. Has anybody ever got angry? Has anybody ever been disgusted with something? That's our world that we live in today. I'm just kind of, that's broad questions. Has anyone ever felt slighted or felt like somebody's taking advantage of you? I would say most of us in this room at one time, and probably this past week if you got off your porch, you got slighted somehow by somebody somewhere. And has anyone, now this is the rough one, you got to be honest here. Has anyone ever held a grudge? Come on, be honest now. We're in church. If we're not going to be honest, we just will close up and we'll play bingo or something. I mean, we've all held a grudge. for the above reasons. We felt like we've been slighted, or felt like we've got mad at somebody. And so today's lesson is about that. And we're going to look at a family. Now, if you look at this family in a worldly sense, you're probably going to go away going, I feel pretty good about my family. They've got a bunch of problems. They've always had problems. And no family is perfect. Sometimes we don't talk about what's going on in our lives because we're like, nobody else is going through this. It's just crazy. I'm sure other families ain't as crazy as ours. Every family's crazy. And all you have to do is read the Bible. There's not one family in the Bible that didn't have problems. There was not one family in the Bible that didn't have hate, grudges, revenge. I mean, it's a book that we should be able to learn from. And that's what today's lesson's all about. We're going to learn from this. And it talks about cooling off. Tom mentions here the very first question, and we'll get into the reason he mentions this. What do we have in society that gives us a cooling off period before we're allowed to do it? What are some things that you can think of that are built-in cooling off periods in our society? Can you go buy a pistol and walk away with it the same day at a legal gun store? You have to wait. For some weapons, you have to wait. There's a cooling off period that if I get mad, I can't go buy a pistol and do something crazy. There's a little bit of a cooling off period. Most states, if you want to get a divorce, can you walk into the judge and say, I hate her, I want a divorce, let's get this over with? No, most states have a cooling off period. You have to file for it, and a couple of days later you have to come in, and if you're still mad and upset, I mean, it's getting easier. You could probably do it online nowadays if you looked. Union contracts and negotiations, Tom put that in there. You know, there's always a cooling off period. If you buy a bad car, you can usually take it back. If you got a lemon, the lemon law kind of protects us. It's probably a pain in the neck to take that lemon back, and you're probably going to lose some money. But there's all kinds of cooling off periods. And we're going to see in our lesson today where some people probably should have did a little cooling off. The biggest thing for us on every day that we should do it, if you use social media, if you send emails, if you send text, if you send messages, or you leave a voicemail, it is wise, I learned this many, many, many times, to sleep on it before you hit that send button. If somebody made you mad and you're going to tell them exactly what they need to do, go ahead and write it out. Do not hit the send button. Go to bed, and the next morning, rewrite it, because I guarantee you're going to rewrite it. And I learned that once I got into management. I would try to fix problems, and I would be fired up, and I'd write this long email out, get ready to send it, and several of my bosses like, Mark, step away. Go for a run, sleep on it, spend 2 or 3 hours, and then come back and rewrite it, because right now your emotions are in the way. And that's what we're going to talk about today, as emotions and some other things. So Debbie, if you will read Proverbs, this is kind of getting us set up for the lesson today. Proverbs 6:16 through 19.
There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who declares lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers.
All right, now we have a loving God, but does he hate things? What does he hate? All right, I'm talking way too much. I need some participation here. What does God hate? Lies, sins, murder. Basically, God hates sins. And we should hate sins. Not people, but sin, sinful action. We should not warm up or go along with sins. And that's what this is talking. Now, if you read this, and you just read through it real quick, and you're like, yep, well, I'm pretty well good. I don't have any of those problems. Let me describe those things to you and see if you really have a clean heart. Haughty eyes, an attitude of arrogance, egotistical, and pride falls into that area. Now, I better guarantee you, if I had a buddy of mine dress up like a hobo and smell, and he come walking in here in really dirty clothes, and he sat down right beside you before church started, you'd be sitting there going, oh my gosh, how am I so lucky that he sat beside me? We're kind of getting into the ego part there, you know. Here's a guy that maybe gal down on her luck, and we think, I need to move chairs. So we got to be careful there. Lying tongue, deceiving others, wicked, worthless, shed innocent blood, violence, revenge, anger towards others, anger towards the innocent. Now, we don't have to actually do that physically. If you get mad at somebody and go, I wish that person was dead, guess what what territory you walked into there? Devises wicked plans. These are just sins, our thoughts and our actions. You know, it just, if you see somebody or they've done something to you and you're like, I wish they would get twice what they dish out. Guess what? You're in that revenge mode. You're decided that I am going to take care of this person, not God. I am going to tell this person what he or she needs to do. Run rapidly to evil. And many of us will go, oh, that's not me. I don't run to evil anymore. I'm older, I'm wiser, and I don't run to evil. How many of us walk faster to the buffet line where we're going to overeat? There's different things that we do in life that we don't really think about it, but they're different types of sins. False witness, declares lies, deceit, tearing down others. And the last one is the seventh feature of the list, one who spreads strife among brothers. The key is this one is among brothers. We should really work hard to not tear down or say things about our fellow brothers and sisters. Not that we should say it about anybody, but we really should not try to tear down others, our brothers and sisters, because we're doing it double. We're making it even worse. And the word that they use there, abomination, means things that greatly offend the Lord, grossly immoral. So we're going to get into this lesson here. Debbie, if you'll read 27, 41 through 45. Think about these 7 things as Debbie reads these verses, and who did what.
So Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. Now when the words of her elder son Esau were reported to Rebekah, she sent word and called her younger son Jacob and said to him, behold, your brother Esau is consoling himself concerning you by planning to kill you. Now then, my son, obey my voice and arise, flee to Haran to my brother Laban. Stay with him a few days until your brother's fury subsides, until your brother's anger against you subsides, and he forgets what you did to him. Then I will send word and get you from there. Why should I lose you both in one day?
All right. Couple of things here. I don't know how many people are parents in here, but we all have parents. I know that for a fact. Nobody in here was hatched. So I know that every person in here has parents. And if you're like me, when you're young, how many people thought their parents probably didn't have all the right ideas and didn't really know how to do things the right way all the time? And sometimes they told you to do something, you're like, if I'm ever a parent, I will never, ever do this. And how many people have went back and done exactly what your parents did? Because now as a parent, you understand what they did and why they did it. Now, not everybody has great parents. I understand that. But God put us in a spot for a reason. And so as we read these verses here, the next question is, where would you put Esau and Jacob? Debbie and I had this talk. Depending on if you're from the north or the south, it's either Esau or Esau. Now, you know, it's tomato, tomato. So where would you put those two in the 7 things that we talked about in Proverbs? Who do you think had the worst list between the 2 brothers? You would think Esau, because he's the kind of the bad character initially, we think. But when you start breaking it down, and Tom broke it down so I didn't have to break it down as hard, Tom had 3 for Esau and 6 for Jacob. And if you put these two together, it's kind of funny to look at it because haughty eyes, this is Esau, haughty eyes, a heart that devised wicked plans, planned to murder his brother. I'm pretty sure you could throw that category together. And feet that run rapidly to evil. He was quick to do evil. Now his brother, the golden child, for most people, Jacob, haughty eyes, lying tongue, a heart that devises evil, feet that run rapidly, false witness, and one that spreads strife. The only thing missing was the shedding of innocent blood. So when you go back and read those verses, and you think about the 2 brothers, neither one of them is perfect, just like us. But Jacob has more things going on here than his brother. So the lesson today is to look at this. And who was the chosen one? Who was the one that's going to provide the lineage? Jacob. And how many times do we see in the Bible God uses the weakest or the worst to do the best? It's over and over and over. So sometimes that gets in the way of us as humans because we look at ourselves and go, oh, I'm not that bad. I'm a pretty good person. You compare me to Charles Manson, I'm an angel. So if we compare ourselves or we allow ourselves to compare ourselves, we can get very careful. But if we're really honest with ourselves, we take God out of our lives, we're all guilty of those 7 things very quickly. There's been so many studies done that if you take a human being, our natural human instinct is wrapped around those 7 things right there. That's our natural human instinct. But God keeps us from doing those. And I went through that list, and I didn't have a problem seeing all 7 of them in my life. Back in the day, that was my life. But God changed me, and I'm getting further and further away from Him. But you put me in the wrong environment at the wrong time, and I can quickly go back to that because we have to have faith in God. And our men's group, our Sunday night study is about adversities and God missing in our lives. Sometimes we get in a rut and we think, God, where are you? You left me, but we leave Him and we have to come back. That's a rabbit. I can't chase that one. I got to move on here. So I've got to be very careful. So it's important that we look at Jacob because we know that the lineage, we know that Christ comes from that lineage. But when we look at him, he's not perfect, and he has a whole bunch of problems. And then in the next question, Genesis 27:42, what is the situation here? What's going on in verse 42? Rebekah hears. Rebekah, let's talk about Rebekah. And this is a rabbit hole I cannot run down because this one could be a whole lesson. What is Rebekah doing? How did she find out that this plan was going on, do you think? Somebody told her. She's got spies within the family. Have you ever spied on your family? Have you ever asked one little sibling to watch another little sibling? It's very easy to pick favorites in a family. It's very easy. They're like, little Johnny, what an idiot. But Sally is so nice. And next thing we know, Sally let me know if little Johnny picks on you. Or vice versa. So it's very easy to do this. And here we got proof that Rebekah is spying because who's her favorite? Jacob. Who's Isaac's favorite? So they've split. They got two different ones. And we see that a lot. We see that in kids all the time. And when you become grandparents, you start to watch your kids raise their kids. And do you spot it quickly? Maybe you didn't see it when you were raising the kids, but it's amazing how fast you spot it watching your kids raise their kids. You're like, all right, kids, be careful. Little Johnny's not better than little Sally. Well, you're not around them a lot. Well, I was around you two, and trust me. But I spent the weekend with the grandkids last week. That's the reason I brought it up. But let me move on. I know I'm being recorded and broadcasted live. Consoling someone. What does it mean to console someone? If I console you, what am I doing? Comforting, helping, providing comfort. Was she consoling Rebecca? Or was she plotting something? Debbie said she's stirring up strife. We're going to see, this would just those verses right there would make a great movie. I'm sure there's one out there sometime. I should have looked it up. But we got to be careful because sometimes we take our consoling, our comfort, we're trying to help somebody, and next thing you know, we've turned that into revenge on the person that hurt them. Have you ever had a friend that's been hurt and they told you their side of the story? There's three sides to every story. Both ends, the two people that were involved, and the truth is in the middle. And depending on which person you talk to, they're going to slant their story to their side most of the time. Very few times is somebody going to be honest enough to go, I had absolutely nothing to do with it. That person's evil and just a jerk. But when you start digging into the problem, you find out not quite that one-sided. It's not quite that black and white. Usually there's other things involved or something that's been leading up to it, or they've been holding a grudge for years and all of a sudden they've popped in. It's out on the table. So we got to be careful because comforting can turn into revenge. Tom talked about that next question there. You're like, we discussed earlier. We didn't discuss this earlier because I left it out because I knew I was going to have a hard time getting through this whole lesson. So I left a couple of little things out. But the word Satam, S-A-T-A-M, what do you think that means? It comes from those verses that we read. Having a grudge or hate. That's the root word, Satam. What other word do you think comes from that word? Change the M to an N. Satan. So Satan comes from that. And then Tom goes into this as an English lesson, so I'm going to briefly brush over this. Satan can be used as both a noun and a verb. When I was learning English in high school, I thought I'd never use it. But I'm going to use it here today. Justify my teacher spending all those times making sure I understood it. Satan can be a noun. We use Satan as a noun all the time, the devil. But it can also be a verb. They're working in a satanic way. They act like Satan. I mean, we can twist that word, but it just means evil. And that's what we're seeing here is a lot of evil. What was Satan's plan in these verses that we just read? What did Satan want Esau to do? Kill his brother. Why did Satan want Esau to kill his brother? Because of the Messiah down the road. It's coming from that line. Now, we sometimes read over that and we're like, oh, that really wasn't the problem. Why not? That was the problem. Satan works and gets us to do things for a reason. Have you ever had Satan to, if you don't want to share, you don't have to, but have you ever had Satan to cause you to do something and you knew immediately it was wrong and you realized why you did it? It works that way a lot. And that's what we're going to see here in these verses. How is Satan in our spiritual battle, in our walk, using us? How is he using us to divide people, to divide groups? All you have to do is turn on the TV and you see division everywhere. Our world is divided all the time. You can't go anywhere without somebody trying to divide you about something. I mean, you just bring up anything. Now you can't even talk about eggs. Price of eggs is crazy. You got to go to the Amish. I mean, it is crazy. You can't have a normal conversation anymore without somebody trying to divide or put evil within your talks. You can, but most of us just avoid it because it's a lot easier. And that's not really what God wants us to do. God doesn't want us to avoid conversations. All right, I'm going down a rabbit hole. Genesis 27:43. What are Rebekah's instructions to Jacob? What does she tell Jacob? Get out of town. Your brother's going to kill you. Get out of town. We look at that and go, that's a proper thing. She knows that the two boys are fighting. The one's going to kill the other one. Just leave, because she's got other plans here. This whole story here, like I said, if I make it through, I'm going to be surprised. But anyhow, how long does she think this is going to last? A few days. You know your brother, he's hot-headed. I got a brother that's hot-headed. Rick, if you're looking this morning, good morning, brother. My brother is hot-headed. He's always been hot-headed. He's got the temper of the two of us, and he knows it. He's a year younger, and he still has the temper between the two of us, and he knows it. But he's hot-headed, and he can get fired up real quick. And he knows I love him, and I know he's not watching anyhow, but I can relate between these two brothers. That was us growing up. Well, I'm not the golden child, but I was smarter and wiser. But Mama tells the one, get out of town. But why does she tell him that? They're going to cool off in a few days. When does Rebekah ever see her son again? 20 years, but she never sees him again. The day she runs him off and tells him to flee was the last time she's seen him. She dies before she sees her son ever again. So our plots can have consequences. Did she think she would never see her son again? Here's her golden child, her favorite. I want you to leave for a few days. Go see my brother. We're going to get into that in a minute. I'll see you in a week or so. Your brother will calm down. You know how hot-headed he is. He'll be calm. We'll let him go out and shoot a goat. He'll be all right. But she never sees her son again, ever. So there's consequences to our actions. And we got to remember that when we tell people stuff. What was Rebekah's closing comments in 27:45? What did she say? Why should I lose you both in one day? What did she think was going to happen that day? Did she think that Esau was going to kill her, Jacob? I truly believe she did. She knew how hot-headed he was. She knew how mad he was. There was no doubt in her mind that one brother was going to kill the other. And the one that was going to be killed was her favorite. Do you think she would ever forgive Esau for killing Jacob? Never. I don't think she had the heart, because she loved one more than she loved the other. So that's my thoughts. Tom didn't put that in there in case that's wrong. But I think that she would have never forgiven herself. And she was truly worried that she was going to lose both of her sons the same day. Now, I've got uncles that's lost their children. I've got friends that I know that's lost children. And I've been told it's the worst thing that can ever happen to you is to lose a child. And I've shared with you, my one uncle and my aunt, they lost 5 out of 6. They lost 3 in one day. All of them close to being teenagers, all 3 of them drowned the same day in the lake. And the baby at the time, they had 2 more, and the 2 more that they had, they lost them to drugs when they got in their teens and 20s. So out of 6 children, they lost 5. And God got them through that. I don't know how. Well, I know how, but they survived losing 5 out of 6 children in such a dramatic way. So Rebecca truly thought she was going to lose both of her boys if she didn't intervene. Debbie, read 27:46.
And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am tired of living because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Heth like these from the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me?
Before we get into this deflection moment of her life, going back to this, be careful of what you tell somebody because you never know how it's going to come out. When I graduated high school, I tried college. It wasn't for me. I just didn't have my mind right. I was running around acting crazy, and I didn't even know what classes I truly had. I mean, that's how uninvolved I was in my college days initially. So I decided I'm going to join the Air Force, get away from my town for a little bit, join for 4 years, figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and then I would get out, come back, and do what I wanted to do. 28 years later, I got out. I forgot to get out for 28 years. God had a different plan for my life. I didn't come back. My dad thought I'd come back. I'm very close to my dad. We hunt, we fish, we do everything together. I even got the old place that he built. My dad thought I would come back, but I have never been back. I left at 18 and I've never been back because God has not told me to go back. I go back to visit, but I didn't go back to live. I met Debbie. I thought, well, I'm a pretty young lady. I think I'm going to date her for a couple of months. That's 43 years I've been dating that woman. I've got this problem. I got the same problem here coming out of things. But 2746, what was Rebecca's mental and emotional state in 2746? She's depressed. She's sick of her life. Have you ever gone through a spell in your life where you're just sick of your life? You just need change in your life. Have you ever had a job where you're like, I have got to get out of this job before it drives me crazy? I've had those jobs. I've had those jobs where I thought maybe I would have to kill my boss to get out of the job because I couldn't get out of it, being in the military. And when I say kill, I'm just joking about that. But I've had bosses where I wanted to do physical harm, maybe choke them out a little bit, but that was back in the day. But anyhow, we all have things, rough trials in our life. We're like, God, get me out of this. I need to get out of this situation. But you know where we do most of our growth in our spiritual walk? In those valleys, in those trials. I learned so much more from those bosses that I just could not really look at, and I learned what not to be like. And that's what we got going on here with Rebecca. But Rebecca says, what caused Rebecca's mental and emotional state? What did she say caused her mental and emotional state? Those crazy daughter-in-laws. I've got this son, Isaac's son. I'm sure if you've ever been married, when Debbie had a problem with the boys, I'd come home and she'd say, your sons, I knew from that point on they'd done something wrong. But if I came home and she said, you know what my sons did? Something great. They probably picked flowers and took them to all the neighbors. I don't know. I knew it wasn't my sons, but it was her sons. Now I'm exaggerating a little bit, but in general, Rebecca here is saying, them daughter-in-laws. Isaac, your son, that's exactly how she phrased it, I'm sure. Isaac, your son, went and married a bunch of harlots over here in town. And they've caused us nothing but grief, which they did. They did cause them grief. Now, it's a little bit different back then than what it is now. We allow our children to go out and pick their spouse. Back then, they had a little assistance most of the time. You know, the parents picked them. So you can assume that Esau didn't really follow that line. He went and picked his own. He didn't really let mom and dad pick his wives. They're not happy with the daughter-in-laws. And Rebekah's going, they're the cause of my trouble. These two women, your son's daughters' wives, are driving me crazy. And they've drove you crazy a little bit. Is that really all of her problem? Yeah. Part of it's deflection. I could have brought her to Celebrate Recovery and we could have talked about her problems a little deeper. Part of it is denial. Part of it's deflection. When we're in trouble, sometimes we try to deflect and we try to put it on something else. She's trying to put it on something else. She's already trying to work the boys out, but we're going to see here in a minute, what's she trying to do with her husband? She's trying to manipulate her husband. And if you've ever been married, or you watched your parents, that goes on all the time. Shouldn't, but it goes on. And we're going to see this a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit, the daughters of Heth. We can go into that, but you can research that if you're really curious. It's all in the Hittite families. You know, you get into the different tribes, you get into all the different. These were not supposed to be in the lineage. You know, back then they tried to make sure that they moved up the ladder instead of going down the ladder. Esau moved down the ladder. But if you just research it a little bit, I'm not going to, because we got so much to go over to here. They also, Hethites, Hittites, children of Heth, there's several different names. But it's the placement of it, and it's a good history lesson if you're into genealogy. Years and years I've skipped over that in the Old Testament, but I finally started reading it and understanding it. And it's really interesting, but you just got to be in the right frame. I've got to be in the right frame of mind to go through it because I don't even want to hear about my family history all the time. I had a good friend in Illinois, and he was 96. And I said, Marvin, his last name was Comstock. I said, Marvin, you ever research your name and see where you came from? He said, no, I'm not interested. With a last name like Comstock, I'm sure I got horse thieves in Kansas somewhere. So he didn't, you know, it was the joke between us. He came from a bunch of horse thieves. But Heth means terror. Rebekah planted a seed in the mind of Isaac. What seed did she plant? I don't want my son doing what your son did. He went out and married a bunch of heathens, and look what this happened. I want us to help Jacob find a nice wife that we like. As our boys got into the teenage years and started dating, I want to tell this quick story on Debbie. Every time Kyle got real serious or the boys got serious about a girlfriend, Debbie would be like, yep, that'd be a good wife. Nope, that wouldn't be a good wife. I'm like, Debbie, they've only been dating for a month. I don't even think I'm thinking about wives yet. But Debbie automatically looked at it as, nice lady. Kind of like this right here. And I was like, good gravy, Debbie. I'm not even close to thinking that yet. I mean, they're going to go through about 40 of them before they pick a wife. I mean, they're anything like their dad. But anyhow, that was Debbie's thinking. I wasn't able to think like that, but Debbie was. And what seed? So she planted this seed about these pagan women. And she wanted to send Isaac away. What was Rebekah doing in planting this thought in Isaac's mind? Whose idea was it going to be once that thought was in Isaac's mind? It's going to be Isaac's plan. Why would she want it to be Isaac's plan instead of her plan? Have we ever done that? Have we ever tried to get somebody else to come up with the idea that we got just in case it doesn't work? You know, the funny thing in the military, I switched jobs about every 2 years. I couldn't hold down a job. But in the military, they try to promote you, so they just keep sending you to a new job. And a lot of companies do that because they want to promote within. But a lot of people failed to ever make it to leadership because They didn't want to stick their neck out and go, let's try this. To be a leader in a company, in your family, in church, you've got to propose and you got to step out on faith. You can't take it the easy and the safe way all the time. It does not work in business a lot of times. Your competitors are looking for the edge. Everybody's looking for an edge to beat you. And she's wanting to have that scapegoat just in case it didn't happen. Perfect example of this is the LA mayor. Who did she just fire? Did anybody see this news? The fire chief. The one woman that had really no control over anything. I mean, they're both of them should be fired by now. But I'm not going to get into that politics. But the whole, anyhow, okay, before I get, she shouldn't have fired her. The reason she fired her was to make herself look good. She was over in Africa on vacation, and she comes back, and everybody's still after her going, why were you in Africa? Why were you on vacation? Your town was burning. Well, I got to get rid of this. I got to get this off my back. Yeah, my fire chief. She should have told me that it was more dangerous than I thought it was. I wouldn't have left town. So she fired her. Horrible situation, but unfortunately we see that all the time. Where did Rebecca want Jacob to go? Her brother. Now I'm going to skip over that because you get into this marrying within the family problem. That's a lesson we could talk about for days. She wanted to go over and pick a wife from her side of the family. You know, my family's better than yours. Why don't you send him over and pick a nice. If you read that story, that was even more of a mess. So she wanted, because we just need to get him out of here. And my family's got not a lot of nice family. My family's a little better than yours. Now, I'm not saying that Tom didn't say that. That's Mark's talking. But they wanted to send him over to marry one of his cousins. I don't even want to get into that. Don't marry your cousin. Move on out of town a little bit. What are the components? And he goes. After let's see here, I missed a page here. So she's planting this seed. She's trying to get what was Rebecca planting this thought in Isaac's mind? Again, to give it to him and let him take it over. Now, what's Isaac thinking? Yeah. It's not her first rodeo. There's a good side of that where you can get people to do things because it benefits them. And you get into leadership, you get into management. A true leader is able to get you to see their vision and to go along with the plan and become part of it and succeed together. That's the definition of true leadership. Our world has taken that word leadership and just destroyed it. But a true leader does exactly what Nancy just said. Get behind the plan. Get behind God's plan, not my plan. But we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But Isaac, I don't think Isaac was a real bold, forceful person. Because what does Isaac? What does he do? Sounds like a good plan to me, honey. Happy wife, happy life. I'm not going to argue about it. We got enough problems with his brother. Sounds like a good idea. Let's send him off. So she convinces him. As a result, Isaac's conversation with his wife, what did he do? Who does he bless? He blesses Jacob and sends him off. Now, there's already been a blessing. There's two blessings. The next page talks about the second and the first blessing. We go into the blessings. You can go back and read those blessings. One's basically a spiritual blessing, and one is a worldly blessing. He blesses him with power, wealth, and blessings. So he's blessing him to send him off. Now, they've already lied to him, and they've already fooled him a couple of times. So he's blessing him and sending him off. They will never see him again. Or Rebekah will never see him again. So the blessings have occurred. Isaac, bless you. Isaac's choice and Rebekah's choice is really, when you get into this and you look at this, just kind of mess things up. Tried to mess things up. But we got to remember God's plan is perfect. God can take all the stupid things that we do and use them for his perfect plan. Debbie, read 28, 6 through 9.
Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take to himself a wife from there, and that when he blessed him, he commanded him, saying, You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. And that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Paddan Aram. So Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan displeased his father Isaac. And Esau went to Ishmael and married, besides the wives that he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth.
All right. So what did Esau see happen? Looking through it through Esau's eyes, what did he see? He said mom and dad sitting around talking about his two wives. Were they favorable about his two wives? No. They're telling his brother, go find a nice wife, unlike your brother who's got a couple of pagans. So do you think that made him feel good about his wives? Do you think he's been told over and over how bad his wives are? I don't think there's any family communication in this family. And we're going to go back and read that here in a minute. They're not talking about important things. They're not talking about God and what God's doing. They're not talking about important family matters. Isaac's probably going, whew, he said, that's a nice goat you killed. He's talking about hunting, agriculture, how the crops are. Rebekah's talking to Jacob about what a nice guy he is. He's beautiful. He's going to marry up. They're not talking about things that matter. And sometimes we get into that. We just talk about minor things. We don't talk about major things because you ever tried to have a serious conversation with your family about serious matters? Do you see people running into the living room to sit down to talk about serious matters going, man, I can't wait. When are we going to do this? Nobody wants to talk about serious matters in families. Most of the time. I'm just saying most families. We'll talk about anything else, sports, everything else. But let's sit down and talk about God and where you guys are going in your life. Most families don't do that anymore. They put their kids in front of a little screen. They put on a cartoon. They put on a TV show. But they don't sit down and talk with their children. Some do, but the couple that we're reading about today did not. What did Esau learn that Isaac told Jacob not to do? Not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Don't be like your brother. I don't think so. I don't think that, me personally, I don't think that they sat down and talked about this. I think they could feel the tension probably, when they come over to have a family meat grilling or whatever they did back then instead of a barbecue. But I don't think they actually sat down and said, son, your two wives are crazy. Or sat down with the wives. I don't think they had that serious conversation. I think they tried to avoid that. And what did Esau realize? That, his daughters displeased his family, displeased his dad. And what did Esau do in response? Here's why I don't think they ever talked to him. And now Esau probably, we could use the word for him, he probably felt a little entitled. Because who was the oldest? Who was supposed to get everything? So unless your parents are talking to you about what's going on in your family, unless they're, I mean, these are grown men. It's not like they're still kids. So they've never really had a conversation going, this is not going to work out. Because when did Rebecca find out who was the favorite in God's eyes? Before she gave birth. Because what was the two boys doing inside? Fighting like a couple of criminals. And they didn't have the systems that we got today. So the two boys were fighting inside her, and she's like, Lord, what's going on? What is going on inside of me? Are the boys okay? She didn't even know she had boys. And what does God tell her? And you go back to Genesis. I wrote a little note here. Genesis 25:23. That's where the blessing comes from. And we go back to that and read that. The only problem is, who does God tell this to? Rebecca. Does he ever tell Isaac? No, there's no proof that God told Isaac. And you got Genesis, you got it there, Ken? What, can you read it real well? Yeah.
And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 people will come from you and be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger.
2 nations, 2 people. The younger will serve the older. Now this is counterproductive to what they normally do. But God spoke to her directly and said, the younger one is going to be the leader. So, but Isaac never gets this word. So Isaac's treating Esau as the oldest, and he's going to be the direct heir. So the problem is in the communication between those two, husband and wife. Do you think Isaac had a problem with God speaking to Rebekah, not to him? This was before women's lib and women's rights and everything else. Isaac was probably like, if God wanted me to know that, honey, he probably didn't call her honey, but if God wanted me to know that, he would have spoke to me directly. I'm not for sure that's really what's supposed to happen here. So there was this family strife all along with these 2 boys that was never resolved. And here we're starting to see it being resolved. It's coming to a head right here. And what does Jacob do when he hears the way that they're talking about his 2 wives? What does he do? What does he go out and find? I mean Esau, yeah, I'm sorry. What does Esau do? He goes out and gets another wife. And he goes, I'm going to make my dad proud because I'm going to go to his family and get this wife, and he's going to come to his senses. That doesn't work. So out of spite, he goes off and finds him another wife. He thinks it's going to solve the problem. But the problem is they've had no communication. They're not on the same page. The family tree is just all over the place. They don't know what's going to happen. So he goes out and he finds a wife from his dad's side. And in the meantime, Jacob is going to get a wife from the mom's side. This is God's plan here. Why do you think? Well, we know why he did it. He responded out of spite, and he was trying to. Esau felt he was entitled. I believe so. He was the firstborn. He was entitled to this blessing. He wasn't going to get it. But he was going to teach him a lesson. He was going to teach his parents a lesson. He was being very disrespectful to his parents. And he was going to go out and find him a bride. The word entitlement, if I never hear that word again the rest of my life, I would be happy. We have abused that word so bad here in the last 16 years. Entitled, entitled, entitled. Freedom, entitlement, freedom, and entitlement. And I'm not going to get into that because that's a rabbit I'd just chase for an hour. But entitlement, and I had a guy last night, I was on social media. He was like, we was talking, and he threw something out there, and I was like, that's not true. And he was like, and he was he was in the military briefly. And apparently he read on my social page that I was in for a long time, and I was a chief. And he was like, Thank you for your service, but you're not entitled to an answer. I said, I'm not entitled to anything. You're the one that brought this point up, so I was just asking your opinion. He quickly stopped the conversation and he was done. He was hoping that the word entitled would get me to fired up and I would say something that he could come back on, but it wasn't going to happen. So Rebecca's parenting skills and Isaac's parenting skills, they didn't make the Parents of the Year. They weren't on the Time magazine. They weren't the best, but I would say that none of us are perfect parents in here. It's a job. It's one of the most it's the roughest, most rewarding, but it's the toughest job you will ever have. And it's the most rewarding job you'll ever have. So, to wrap this up, what would you have done differently if you were the parents of those two? Gave them both spankings? No. First of all, the lesson is we need to communicate. We got to talk to our kids. We got to talk to our grandkids. We got to let them see us. We got to share with them. Now you start looking at this story and you go back and you look at it. You look at it from a worldly view and you're like, what a messed up family. My gosh. They couldn't have been that dumb. But then you look at it from a spiritual standpoint, what was the Lord's plan all along? The Lord had a plan. But these four individuals that we read about today were not following the plan. And you got to give Rebecca credit on that side of it, if you look at it from the spiritual side, because God told her from the very beginning who was going to be the favorite, who was going to be the leader. So she was following God's word. But instead of telling her husband, I'm following God, and I just want you to follow God with me. Instead, she decided to connive and plot all these little courses and try to do everything her way to make God's plan work. And that's what we got to be careful of. Sometimes we just got to stick with God's plan. We watched a movie last night, Average Joe, about the football player that lost his job because he was praying on the 50-yard line, ex-Marine. I wish he would have been Air Force guy. It would have been a much better movie. But anyhow, he was a Marine, grew up in a foster home, horrible life, a Marine. But God was using all those years, all those tragedies in his life to prepare him for this one battle. He spent 5 years in court and finally won at the Supreme Court level. It's a true story. It's a great story. It's a great movie, Average Joe. But what are our takeaways from today's lesson? Other than don't follow this parental guidelines here. Yeah. Stay in a relationship with God and share that God has got you on this track. God wants us to do this. God wants, as soon as you take God out of the picture and go, honey, we're going to do this because I want to do it, you've changed the whole scenario. If you're both praying and God is the center of your life and He is the focus of what's going on in your lives together, you're able to talk about it a little bit easier. What else? What about bitterness? Good or bad? Bad. You know, there's just not too many bitter people that are happy. If you find any of them, take a picture and let them know they're the first ones you've come across. Bitter people are angry. They're looking for revenge, and they're just not, most of the time, enjoyable to be around, unless you're looking for a project or something that you think that you can help. Heartbreak, discerning God's plan. Has anybody ever got an email from God told you exactly what you're going to do this week? No. You know, sometimes it can be difficult knowing exactly what God wants us to do. But you know, He'll put people in our place. He'll put things in our life. He will give us clues of what we're supposed to do. You know, the study tonight is on Joseph. And if you know the end of the story, which all of you do, what a great story. But if you look at the 17 years of trials that he went through before the good part started, he didn't get those signs. And we don't get them all the time either. But we got to trust in God for everything that we do. All right, I made it, but I'm late. I'm sorry. We're a minute late. Any last minute so we can be 2 minutes late and it's not on me? Look at there, I'm deflecting that problem. I don't want to be the cause of us being late. Who wants to add one thing and we'll say, you did it. You were the reason we were late. All right, have a great week and trust in the Lord. Thank you, guys.